Vietnam's economy maintained resilient in 2024. And growth momentum continues despite headwinds in 2025. Hello and welcome to BizLine, and thank you for joining us for the final episode of 2024. This year, Vietnam has successfully navigated complex global challenges while maintaining resilience and growth across key sectors. The country has emerged as a regional leader in strong growth momentum. As we wrap up the year, we'll take a closer look at how Vietnam's economy has performed in 2024 and explore how this momentum might shape 2025. What challenges lie ahead for the country? Stay tuned as we dive into these topics and more in today's episode of BizLine. But first, let's review the highlights of Vietnam's economic performance in the following clip.
Vietnam's economic growth in 2024 is estimated at over 7%, exceeding the 6 to 6.5% target. This makes it among the few countries with high growth rates regionally and globally. The macroeconomy continues to be stable, with inflation controlled below 4% and major balances ensured. The currency market and exchange rates have been essentially stable. Interest rates continue downward compared to 2023. The country's national brand value reached 507 billion USD, up one place compared to 2023. Total import-export turnover is estimated at a record-breaking 807.7 billion USD. Several products have achieved impressive export turnover. Textile exports ranked second in the world, while rice and seafood exports both ranked third. The trade balance remains in surplus at nearly 25 billion USD, marking the 9th consecutive year of surplus. Due to winning an increasing number of orders, Vietnam continues to effectively exploit international markets such as the US, the European Union, and ASEAN countries.
Chúng tôi đang có kín đơn hàng đến hết cái tháng 1 của năm 2025, và trong cái quý 1 của 2025 thì chúng tôi cũng đang ký được khoảng 70% cái lượng năng lực chúng tôi có thể sản xuất được.
The Industrial Production Index, (IP), in the first 11 months increased by 84% year-on-year. The Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, remains above the 50-point threshold, reflecting strong production recovery. By the end of 2024, Vietnam will be among the 15 developing countries attracting the largest volume of FDI in the world. Realized FDI capital in the first 11 months grew nearly 7% year-on-year, and is expected to set a new record high in 2024. The country has secured a number of large projects, notably in high-tech and semiconductors.
Lĩnh vực chế biến chế tạo thì vẫn tiếp tục là cái động lực tăng trưởng và đóng góp gần 2/3 vào tổng nguồn vốn thu hút FDI của Việt Nam trong năm nay. Đặc biệt là gần đây thì NVDA thì cũng đã có cái thương vụ mua lại Vinpearl, hợp tác góp vốn với FPT để xây dựng nhà máy về AI, trí tuệ nhân tạo tại Việt Nam.
Vietnam tourism has recovered strongly, with the number of both international and domestic visitors growing rapidly. Total international arrivals in the first 11 months reached nearly 16 million, an increase of 41.0% year-on-year, while domestic tourist arrivals hit 105 million.
In order to uncover Vietnam's achievements in 2024 and get insights into the opportunities that await in the coming year, we connect with Ms. Dosati Madani, Senior Economist at the World Bank Vietnam. Thank you so much for being here with us. What is your assessment about Vietnam's economic performance in 2024 in general amid the global context?
I think Vietnam has done a remarkable job in 2024, given the disturbances, the general uncertainties associated with what we saw in the global economy. And, I think Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies in the East Asia region, and has shown that in the first 3 quarters, growth was accelerating, going from about 6.5 to 7.4, and we expect the last quarter to also remain relatively strong, So overall, a very good performance, driven mostly by a recovery, by a strong recovery of trade and exports, and also a more moderate recovery of the domestic economy.
What were the highlights of Vietnam's economic achievements and challenges in 2024?
So I think one of the things that we noticed really early on is one of the highlights was the recovery of exports from last year's reductions that we saw, weaknesses that we saw last year. And that was a very important driver, creates a lot of jobs, and also supports your economic growth. One of the things that we saw also was that both domestic consumption and domestic investment started to moderately recover, thanks to the overall improvement of economic conditions related to exports. But one of the things that we also notice is that there's still some, the sentiment, domestic investment sentiment and consumption sentiment are not yet fully back to pre-COVID period. Right now we see, for example, growth in the consumption in retail of around 8%. For the past several months, or basically the whole year, while before COVID, it was around 11 to 12% growth every month. On the investment side, the real estate markets have not fully recovered, and because of that, there is impact on construction. There's impact on a whole range of economic activities, and that affects the economy, the economic growth overall, the contribution that investment can make to economic growth. Now, I have to also highlight that Vietnam has done really well in terms of continuing to attract FDI. Now, FDI has been a major source of economic, of revenue, of capital coming in, of investment, of creation of jobs and exports, and we saw that also this year. That has continued, basically signaling that international companies, international foreign investors view Vietnam as still a very good place to invest in and conduct economic activity.
What are your assessments about the Vietnamese government's directions and management policies to ensure economic growth in 2024?
So I think the government has tried its best to accommodate the different uncertainties they have faced. I think on the monetary policy side, they have tried to manage some of the pressure on the exchange rate because of various drivers that affected this exchange rate. One of them was the strengthening US dollar. They've tried to balance the drive that was happening, the situation that was happening in the gold market, which to try to bring down this aspect of the potential a bit of over enthusiasm by people trying to buy gold and therefore driving the price of gold very high. On the fiscal side, I think that the government has tried again to push out or to promote implementation of investment, of the investment budget. I think that has been more of a mixed picture. The government has tried, and one should give credit to them, is trying to change some of the regulations and remove some of the barriers associated with implementing public investment. And I think that will help over time to ease this process of getting projects approved and implemented and basically become useful to the economy and to the population, as opposed to the past few years where there was a lot more difficulty.
The global economy is forecast to face numerous risks and uncertainties in 2025, such as U.S. trade tariffs and a stronger dollar.
There is some uncertainty in terms of the 2025 monetary trajectory by the Fed, because it also depends on what kind of policies we'll see when the new administration comes in. But for now, we still expect 100 basis point of rate cuts by the Fed next year.
Gia tăng áp lực lạm phát tại Mỹ trong năm 2025. Điều này sẽ khiến cho Fed có thể phải chậm hơn trong cái lộ trình cắt giảm lãi suất trong năm tới. Việt Nam đang là cái nước có thặng dư thương mại lớn thứ 3 với Mỹ. Do đó thì chúng ta vẫn có những cái nguy cơ sẽ bị áp thêm các cái biện pháp về phòng vệ thương mại, và nó cũng sẽ ảnh hưởng tới triển vọng xuất khẩu của miền Nam trong năm tới.
Thị trường đã phải giảm cái kỳ vọng từ việc giảm lãi suất 4 lần của Fed trong năm 2025 xuống còn có 2 lần thôi. Cộng với những cái việc mà hành động của ông Trump làm cho nền kinh tế Mỹ tiếp tục mạnh như vậy thì nó sẽ khiến cho đồng đô nó sẽ mạnh lên, tiếp tục gây cái áp lực tỷ giá đối với tất cả các quốc gia khác trên thế giới và trong đó có Việt Nam của chúng ta.
According to experts, foreign exchange rate pressure will be maintained for at least the next 6 months. Meanwhile, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, warned that geopolitical tensions pose short-term risks, public debt ratios are high, and medium-term growth prospects are weak. Despite the challenges, Goldman Sachs research forecasts that the global economy will still grow solidly in 2025, with a steady growth rate of 2.7%.
Trung Quốc có những cái cam kết và muốn tung ra những cái gói chính sách tài khóa để hỗ trợ cái nền kinh tế của họ. Rồi bên thị trường châu Âu thì chúng tôi cho rằng là họ sẽ tiếp tục cái sự phục hồi chậm một chút nhưng mà tiếp tục là phục hồi. Nhật thì cũng có cái sự phục hồi nhất định.
What external factors would have the biggest impacts on Vietnam's economy in 2025?
I think the geopolitical situation globally has been changing and becoming more uncertain. So in this uncertainty, there is opportunity and there's challenges, right? We know that the U.S. Government is changing, the U.S. presidency is changing, and the future president has suggested that he wants to implement tariffs on everybody. And that could be potentially a challenge for the exporters in Vietnam. But also, if they are more productive, if they are more innovative, if they are more creative, and they can increase their productivity and their competitiveness, this could actually also help them capture new markets. They can become more competitive than their competitors in sending products to the US. It's also important over time, though, that Vietnam consider that they need to upgrade their industrial production. The production and export of your products will need to have more value addition. You will need to have more technology and innovation embedded in the products. And for that, you will need to kind of try to attract investment that carry that kind of knowledge with it. The Fed has already taken 3 steps down. They have announced that they're going to do another, at least, I think, 2 in 2025. It reduces some of the global interest rates and therefore eases the differential between Vietnamese interest rates and the global interest rates. And that reduces some of the stress on the exchange rate for Vietnam. I think one of the things to look at is actually how the economy of US is growing. And we expect it to grow at around 2 to 2.5% this coming year. Whether the European Union markets are recovering, and we expect that to also the whole of the European Union to improve a little bit in its growth, so maybe around 0.8 or 1% based on our global economic prospect that the World Bank puts out. On the other hand, China's economic growth may slow down a bit, and China, of course, is your 3rd major partner, so that can affect a little bit the prospects for exports going there. Overall, though, I think that export will continue to grow, but maybe potentially at a more moderate rate than what we saw in 2024.
Which will be the key pillars that drive the country's economy internally, and what are the challenges?
So I think the domestic drivers of growth usually are domestic investment and domestic consumption. And what we are seeing from recent consumer surveys suggests that consumers continue to improve, the confidence of consumers continues to improve as the economy has improved this year and is expected to continue improving into next year. Now, how fast is the question, right? We don't expect it to necessarily fully recover in maybe the first half of the year, but hopefully in the second half of 2025, we will see a fuller recovery of consumer confidence, which will push up their demand, their expenditures, and therefore sales, retail sales. On the investment side, I think one of the major things to look for is recovery, hopefully, of continued recovery of the real estate markets, so that then you will see more investment on that perspective. I think the financial sector, banking sector, will need more attention. And, we've seen a lot of non-performing loans. It's important that this NPLs, non-performing loans, be well managed and addressed and appropriately written off if needed. So there's regulations and rules and legal measures that need to be taken to provide a number of facilities to the central bank, the State Bank of Vietnam, including stronger basically bank resolution laws, stronger supervisory laws, more of an independence for the central bank to be able to manage the process properly. So that, I think, is an important thing, and hopefully the quality of the assets, the banking assets, will not further deteriorate, because we don't, it could put more strain on the banking system, and that could potentially impact the economy for 2025.
The National Assembly aims for a 2025 GDP growth target of 6.5 to 7%, reflecting high hopes for economic improvement. As such, Vietnam's GDP is expected to reach $500 billion USD in 2025, becoming the 33rd largest economy globally and the 4th in ASEAN. Meanwhile, international financial institutions expect bright prospects for Vietnam's economy in 2025. Standard Chartered expects strong GDP growth of 6.7% in 2025, with growth easing from 7.5% year-on-year in the first half of the year to 6.1% in the second half. The Asian Development Bank, ADB, has also raised its economic growth forecast to 6.6%, up from the 6.2% forecast made in September. In a recently published report, Oxford Economics predicted that Vietnam's economy will stand out among the ASEAN 6, growing faster than its peers at 6.5% in 2025. It added as evidence strong manufacturing fundamentals, a bright domestic sector outlook, and better credit growth.
The National Assembly set the GDP growth target to be 6.5 to 7% in 2025. Based on your analysis, how feasible is it?
Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies in East Asia. And that's probably one of the fastest growing economies in the world, if we look closely enough. I think this drive will continue. I think we expect Vietnam to continue to perform well next year. So I think the number of 6.5 is what we had published previously. And I think that's a reasonable number to, for now, at least. We will see how things evolve in the next several months, and then we may adjust. But for now, I think 6.5 is a reasonable number to base our growth numbers on.
Now, how can the private sector contribute to this target?
I think the private sector is contributing a lot already. You have the FDI sector, which does a lot of the exports. You have the domestic economy that exports but also produces domestically. I've pointed out that it's important to help build up the confidence of the consumers, of course. With the exports continuing to moderately grow next year, domestic investment, I think, will also kind of be impacted by that positive dynamics that is happening in the external sector of the economy. And there will be some, benefits from that. I think what the government can actually do is to try to improve the business environment further. We know that they have made a big effort to reduce regulations for businesses, and I think it's a very important element to try to keep Vietnam competitive and make it more competitive. I think developing a facility or ability to help small and medium businesses be able to access credit is going to become increasingly important in an economy that wants to move to high income by 2045. You want to have a domestic economy that has much more domestic businesses that have much more access to formal credit. I think investing in human capital in education, in higher end, like university education and technical capacity improvements will be critical going forward. So I think the role of the government is certainly very important in supporting the domestic private economy in Vietnam.
Cần xem xét thêm việc mở rộng chính sách tài khóa thông qua việc là duy trì các cái chính sách miễn giảm thuế phí, cũng như là làm sao mà có những cái chính sách để thúc đẩy mạnh hơn cái tiêu dùng trong nước. Tính toán lại cái việc là giảm trừ gia cảnh trong thuế thu nhập cá nhân, nó cũng là những cái biện pháp mà có thể sẽ giúp cải thiện cái sức mua của người dân trong thời gian tới và đóng góp cho tăng trưởng kinh tế.
So as the global economy increasingly pivots towards digitalization, Vietnam's workforce must be equipped to meet the demands of emerging industries. So this means strengthening STEM education and providing vocational training and upskilling opportunities to bridge current gaps in technical expertise. A well-prepared workforce in Vietnam will enhance productivity, attract higher value investments, and also ensure Vietnam remains competitive in an ever-evolving global landscape.
Thứ nhất là cái tốc độ về sắp xếp tinh gọn bộ máy phải làm trong quý 1, cái đó chúng ta phải thấy được kết quả. Thứ hai là những cái tốc độ về giải ngân phải tiến hành, chúng ta sẽ thấy cái tốc độ nó phải diễn ra đều đặn hơn qua các tháng, qua các quý của năm sau. Và yếu tố thứ ba chúng tôi thấy hai cái ngành lớn cần phải có những cái tháo gỡ mang tính đột phá liên quan đến ngành bất động sản, năng lượng tái tạo.
What recommendations would you make for Vietnam to achieve its growth target for 2025?
So I think that, to make it more sustainable, if you want to grow at a fast pace to achieve your goal of becoming high income in 2045, there's clearly a need, as I mentioned a bit earlier, for improving or investing in your human capital. You need to have much more of a you need to build an economy that is based on productivity, growth and innovation. And in order to do that, in order to make that transition from the vibrant economy you have now, but to a different and a new economy, you will need to invest in your population. Technical level, high university level, high-end tertiary education, etc., etc. That's going to be really important. The other element is that a sustainable economy will need to be a green economy going forward. And that, I think, will require the authorities to focus on mitigation and reducing carbon production and gas, global climate change gases that are produced, including, for example, what's happening in the 1 million hectare rice project that the government has undertaken, which is very, very impressive. But also on adaptation side. On the adaptation side, there's a lot of activities that can be done to help build, for example, infrastructure in digital, in roads, in transport, in buildings, and all sorts of, backbone services that are much more resilient to climate change. And that's going to become increasingly important for Vietnam. The digital technology is going to become very, very useful for Vietnam going forward to keep it more competitive and more dynamic. Finally, I think the role of the government for the short run, I think, for the medium run, I should say, for now, I think two major points I would make. One is going to be very important to have an institution, a governmental institution that is much more productive in terms of supporting investments that are, like public investment that is implementable well implemented, well thought through, well developed, and also well implemented. Because you need to build services backbone for the future so that businesses can be kind of like crowded in onto your investments and build and flourish. And by them flourishing, then the economy and the whole of Vietnam flourishes. Right? So that's a very important thing going forward. The second thing I think is addressing the issue of the banking and financial sector in the medium term. Because if you have a healthy and inclusive banking sector, that banking sector can then mature to be able to support the capital needs the financing needs of your economy that is growing so quickly. And that's going to become key for Vietnam going forward.
Once again, thank you so much for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Experts suggest that Vietnam should invest more in human capital through advanced education and technical skills to drive productivity and innovation. Building a green, climate-resilient economy is essential, focusing on reducing emissions, improving infrastructure, and leveraging digital technology for competitiveness. Additionally, fostering effective public investment will be key to Vietnam's economic growth in 2025 and longer terms. And that wraps up this edition of BizLine. As we close the chapter on this year and look ahead, we wish all our viewers a prosperous and successful new year. May 2025 bring you growth, opportunity, and success. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.